Welcome back. Now, some pastors are unhappy that restrictions on church services are still in place. Religious gatherings are limited to 50% of a venue's capacity. The pastors have gathered under the banner of Active African Christian United Movement. It's calling for the restrictions to be lifted, just like the state of disaster. Let's go to our reporter, Nqobile Madlala, who's been following developments for us. Nqobile, they've threatened government and they've mentioned something about protesting or marching somewhere on the 13th of April. Give us more details.
Well, Maseko, from what we heard from Akumi, they're saying that at this point they are going to go on the ground, they're going to speak to communities, and they're saying they're going to educate them about the amendment of the Act. And they're saying that this is because a lot of people do not understand what this entails and what it means for them in the long run. And this is an act as well of ensuring that as they go towards marching, which would be happening on the 13th of April, this is 2 days before the closing dates, which we understand is the day that would be decided in terms of whether or not we are taking this act or is being amended. So now we know that it's open for public, but they're saying that publicly they want to go out and say that no to it. They just want the lockdown lifted completely. And this, of course, we know is before the Easter. And they're saying that it's very important that by the time we get to the Easter, that their people are able to go back to church in full capacity. But I want to bring in South African Council of Churches. And so, I mean, we were just having a conversation just earlier, and I want to first start here. What is your view in terms of the amending of the National Health Act?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to the viewers and good afternoon to you. The South African Council of Churches takes the view that the lifting of the state of the national disaster is a very significant step towards normalization of our life as a nation. We want to start by acknowledging, led by government, South Africa had to respond to something that we have never experienced before, at least in our lifetimes. And that demanded a lot of sacrifices from all of us. And we are here at this juncture now because all of us have done all that we can, at least the most of us, to make sure that we don't only get control of the virus, but we're able to move to some semblance of normalcy. And that's a good thing, and that we need to celebrate that and thank all South Africans, as I said, led by government in that response. The need now to move from that experience into a life that acknowledges that there is something that makes the virus still present in our midst. It means some creativity amongst ourselves. And therefore our view is, South Africans, we might say that the time is short, that time government gave us to reflect on this matter. But it's something that I think all of us need to make our inputs on and make sure that it does not normalize a restricted life. It is a place, it's an amendment that allows us to live as free as possible, noting the dangers and the difficulties of living with the virus in our midst. Scientists tell us that the virus is not going to disappear, that we have to find a way to manage the virus. And that has got levels. The levels of individual responsibility, levels of different institutions in society, and a level where we work together through the leadership of government to find a proper way. It is clear that where there is an infringement of any rights that we have as citizens, that needs to be resisted so that we are not finding ourselves into a permanent state of national disaster, and we end up finding ourselves in that difficult space. Yet the most important concern of the South African Council of Churches is what is it that we are doing now, even in the transitional period that the President has announced. That is our greatest concern, because in that transitional process that the President has announced, there are things that concern us very deeply. And one of those things is the idea that the gatherings of the church are simply other gatherings, because that idea undermines fundamentally what the church is to its members and what the church is to society. The church is to its members a place of gathering so that they worship their God in a spirit that inspires them in these difficult times. That allows us to make sure when we gather as the church, we're able to give honor to the God who has led us through this difficult time, but most importantly, find inspirations and find ways to make us able to live responsibly into the future, but also finding the courage to walk with God in our faith.
Do you feel that the regulations that are still in place limit the church?
No doubt about it. The transitional measures that the president have announced that are going to be 30 days, as he has announced, are clearly saying to the church, firstly, you're going to meet at 50% of the capacity. They don't have a number of restrictions, which is a good thing, but it's 50%. That means, therefore, people cannot come to church as they want to come. That is a restriction. Secondly, the most biggest concern for us, the president suggests to us, without making it very obvious, that they are instituting now vaccine mandates. And those vaccine mandates that we as the church need to police in our churches. We've got serious problems with that because, firstly, it goes fundamentally against what the church is. The church in its basic form is a place where all people are encouraged to come together to worship God. And if you then say to the people of God that we are going to have a vaccine mandate at the door, and then we're going to tell you, if you're not vaccinated, you can't come in and worship your God, that is an affront to what the church is. Secondly, to ask the church now almost to be the vaccine police on behalf of the power of government is unfair on the church, because it puts the church in a very difficult position where now we must police people in order for them to get in to be vaccinated. Our view is that the churches have done a lot of sacrifice. We have sacrificed the Good Fridays of 2020. We have sacrificed the Good Fridays of 2021. Not only that, we as the South African Council of Churches developed what we called norms and standards for church life during COVID. And through all of those events, we've tried to teach people about social distancing, about wearing a mask, about washing, and all the non-pharmaceutical interventions. On top of that, we employed with the help of Solidarity Fund, we partnered into making sure that there's a vaccination drive. And that vaccination drive we call Vexumzansi, and it still continues. We call on our people to vaccinate. We call on those who are vaccinated to get their boosters. And all those things are things that we firmly believe need to be done. But to move from them and say to people, people can't worship because they do not have a vaccination certificate is taking it too far.
But wouldn't you say that it's just an extension of what you've already done? It's just a mere extension.
Which means it's a normalization. That's the point I'm getting to. It's a normalization of the national disaster thing for the church. In other words, you lift it up for others, but for the church, and I'm only going to speak for the church, they remain in that national disaster. That's unacceptable. We cannot live like that. By the way, science tells us that with the vaccination program that has taken place, and also the fact that people have been infected, whether they know it or not, we have reached a certain level of immunization in the nation that allows us to deal with this virus as a protected community, not against infection, because nobody can protect against infection, at least up to now, but we're protected to the adverse from the adverse impacts of this serious illness. We are protected from death taking place. So all those things need to be put together. When serious illness was part of it, when death was part of the equation, when indeed we did not know much of this virus, the South African Council of Churches was in the forefront of asking the churches not to gather, of asking people to do certain things. So where we are right now, we are saying we need to speak to our people who are going through grief, who are going through loneliness, who are going through hopelessness. That's what we need to do.
All right. Thank you very much, Reverend. Well, there you have it, Masego, the South African Council of Churches, just saying to us that the only worry or the major worry is that it's the normalization. And they're saying that that becomes a major issue because the church needs to reach out to its congregants, and it needs to be at a point where it's really just in an equilibrium, where it's a place that is safe for everyone.
All right, Nqobile Madlala, let's leave it there for now and go back to Deep Sloot, where